Every culture attempts to draw a map of its universe. This is a natural human impulse, an effort to impose order on the unknown and to understand our place within a grander structure. These maps can be geometric, with perfect celestial spheres rotating in mathematical harmony, or they can be centered on a holy mountain, a divine city, or a central star. They are expressions of a culture's deepest assumptions about order, creation, and meaning. The Norse had such a map, but its center was not a fixed point of abstract perfection. The axis of their universe was a living, biological system, and it was in a constant state of suffering. The center of the Norse cosmos was Yggdrasil, an ash tree of incomprehensible scale. Its branches scraped the heavens, and its three great roots anchored themselves in the wellsprings of existence. Yet, its life was not one of serenity, but of constant endurance against the forces of decay. The sources describe it being chewed upon by hearts, gnawed from below by a great serpent, and afflicted with rot in its trunk. It was an image of a universe that was beautiful and alive, but also simultaneously under assault. This tree, the anchor of all life, was a microcosm of the Norse understanding of existence, a precarious, ongoing struggle against the forces of dissolution. From Yggdrasil's boughs and roots extended a complex geography of 9 worlds. These were functional domains, each representing a core principle within the cosmic structure. There was the fortified stronghold of the gods, a bastion of imposed order, the untamed wilderness of the giants, a permanent source of chaotic pressure, and the contested middle ground of humanity, suspended between these two poles. The connections between these worlds were tangible, a burning rainbow bridge, the roots of the tree itself, making the cosmos an interconnected and therefore volatile system. An event in one world could have immediate and severe consequences for all the others. This video, therefore, will analyze the architecture of this cosmic system. We will explore how this vision of the universe, rooted in a suffering tree and defined by the constant threat of dissolution, is a direct reflection of the Norse worldview. We will see that this was not a cosmos of good versus evil, but one of managed conflict between order and chaos, a system governed by an inescapable fate and a structure destined for a violent renewal. But before we dive in, please support us by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. It helps out a lot. Thanks. At the center of the Norse cosmic model stands the world tree, Yggdrasil. The name itself is our first indication of its function and meaning. It is a compound of Ygga, meaning the terrible one of the many names for the god Odin, and Drasil, a poetic word for a horse. Yggdrasil therefore translates to Odin's horse. This is not a reference to a steed he rides into battle, but to the gallows from which he hung himself in a ritual of self-sacrifice. The gallows was poetically known as the horse of the hanged. The name Yggdrasil permanently encodes the tree with the story of Odin's ordeal. 9 nights of torment, suspended between life and death, through which he gained the knowledge of the runes and the secrets of the cosmos. The tree is therefore not just a pillar holding up the worlds. It is an instrument of shamanic transformation, a vehicle for accessing foundational knowledge through extreme suffering. Our most detailed description of the tree comes from the poem Grimnismal, or The Sayings of the Masked One, where Odin himself describes the structure of the universe. He makes it clear that Yggdrasil is not a static or invulnerable object. It is a living thing that endures constant, agonizing hardship. As the poem states, more hardship the ash Yggdrasil suffers than men can know. This is not an abstract statement. The poem proceeds to list its torments with biological precision. 4 stags live among its highest branches, craning their necks to chew upon its leaves and newest shoots. Far below, at its base, a host of serpents gnaws at its roots, led by the great dragon Nidhugga, the malice striker. The text names several others, like Goin and Moin, suggesting a constant, writhing infestation eating away at the universe's foundation. And between these 2 points of attack, the poem adds, the trunk of the tree is afflicted with rot. Yggdrasil is a system in a state of perpetual, managed decay. Its existence is not a given. It is a victory of endurance over the unceasing forces that seek to wear it down. The tree's stability comes from 3 great roots that anchor it in the fundamental principles of the cosmos. Each root connects to a specific wellspring. One root extends toward Niflheim, the primordial world of ice, and draws water from the spring Hvergelmir, the bubbling cauldron. This is the spring from which all the rivers of the universe flow, grounding the tree in the raw, creative elements of the cosmos. It is here, among the frost giants, that the serpent Nidhöggr performs its destructive work. A second root finds its terminus in the land of the giants at the well of Mimir, or Mimisbrunna. This well is the source of all cosmic wisdom and intelligence. It is guarded by the ancient being Mimir, whose knowledge is so complete that Odin himself sought it out. To gain a single drink from its waters, Odin had to sacrifice one of his own eyes, exchanging physical sight for a deeper internal vision of how the universe functions. The story of Mimir himself is a testament to the violent history of the gods. He was beheaded by the Vanir during their war with the Aesir. Odin preserved Mimir's head with herbs and spells, and continued to consult it for its knowledge, an act that highlights the often grim and pragmatic nature of divine power. The third and most important route is in the heavens, near Asgard, and it terminates in the Well of Urda, the Well of Fate. Here dwell the Norns, 3 figures of tremendous power. Urda, whose name means fate, or that which has become. Verdandi, that which is becoming. And Skuld, that which shall be, past, present, and future. Their presence at the root of the tree establishes that the entire Norse cosmos is subject to a predetermined, inescapable fate. The Norns are not passive observers. Every day they take the white, loamy water from their well and pour it over the roots of Yggdrasil to heal the damage done by the stags and the serpents, and to prevent the tree's wood from rotting. The trunk of the tree itself serves as a conduit for this cosmic tension. In the highest branches sits a great, unnamed eagle who is said to know many things. Between the eagle's eyes sits a hawk named Vedafölnir. While the eagle observes the universe, the serpent Nidhöggr tears at its foundation from below. The animosity between these 2 figures, one representing the celestial heights, the other the wicked depths, is perpetually stoked by the squirrel Ratatoskr. His name means drill tooth, and his only function is to scurry up and down the tree, carrying slanderous insults between the eagle and the serpent. He is an agent of discord, ensuring that the fundamental conflict at the heart of the universe never ceases. His permanent presence suggests that this friction is not a flaw in the system, but an essential part of the energy that animates it. The great Ash Yggdrasil connected a cosmos that was partitioned into a complex, multi-layered geography. While the number of worlds was 9, their arrangement followed a clear logic, typically organized into 3 distinct vertical levels. This was not only a physical layout, but a moral and functional one, creating a hierarchy that separated the ordered domains of the gods from the chaotic wilderness of their adversaries, with the world of humanity positioned precariously in between. At the highest level of the cosmos were the worlds of the gods and their celestial allies, representing the forces of order, creation, and structure. The most prominent of these was Asgard, the enclosure of the Aesir. This was the fortified home of the primary pantheon of gods like Odin, Thor, and Frigg. But Asgard was not a primordial paradise. It was a fortress, a constructed bastion of order in a universe where chaos was the default state. Its existence was a testament to the gods' power to build and defend. The story of Asgard's primary defense, its great outer wall, illustrates the pragmatic and often treacherous nature of the gods. Early in their history, a giant disguised as a human builder offered to construct a wall around Asgard, one so strong it would be impervious to any attack from the giants of Jotunheim. His price was steep: the sun, the moon, and the hand of the goddess Freya in marriage. The gods, goaded by Loki, agreed to the terms, but only if the builder could complete the work in a single winter with no help from any man. The builder agreed on the condition that he could use his stallion, Svartálfheimr. The stallion's strength was shocking, and as the end of winter approached, the wall was nearly finished. The gods, facing the loss of Freya and the celestial bodies, panicked and turned on Loki, threatening him with death unless he sabotaged the giant's work. Loki, transforming himself into a mare, lured the stallion Svartálfheimr away into the woods. Without his horse, the giant could not finish the final gate in time and flew into a rage, revealing his true form. Thor, paying the giant his wages, killed him with a blow from his hammer, Mjolnir. The episode resulted in Asgard's fortification, but it was founded on a broken oath, an act of divine deceit, and it produced an unusual offspring. Loki, in the form of the mare, later gave birth to the eight-legged horse Sleipnir, who would become Odin's own steed. Within this great wall, Asgard was a domain of magnificent halls, each reflecting the character of its owner. Odin presided over Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain. This was not a heaven for the righteous, but a military barracks for elite mortal warriors, the Einherjar, who had died in battle. Its rafters were said to be made of spears, its roof of shields, and it had 540 doors, each wide enough for 800 warriors to march through shoulder to shoulder. Every day, the Einherjar would fight and kill each other on the fields of Asgard, only to be resurrected each evening to feast on the meat of the eternally regenerating boar, Sehrimnir, and drink mead provided by the goat, Heidrun. The purpose of this martial afterlife was singular. Odin was assembling a vast army for the final, hopeless battle of Ragnarök. Yet Valhalla was not the only destination for fallen warriors. The powerful Vanir goddess Freya claimed half of all those slain in combat for her own hall, Sessrumnir, located in her field, Folkvanga. That one of the Vanir, a goddess associated with love, beauty, and fertility, commanded such authority over the dead warriors of Midgard is a strong indicator of her high status and the integration of the two divine tribes. Elsewhere, Thor, the champion of the gods, lived in the largest of all the halls, the 540-room Bilskirnir. The sheer scale of his home suggests his importance and popularity as a protector figure. These halls were connected to the middle world of humanity by the Bifrost, a shimmering, rainbow-coloured bridge. It was made of fire, a security measure to prevent the frost giants from crossing into Asgard, and it was guarded day and night by the god Heimdallr, whose senses were so acute he could hear wool growing on a sheep's back. Also among the upper worlds was Vanaheim, the original home of the Vanir gods, before their war and later integration with the Aesir. While its location is never precisely described, its character was distinct from the martial order of Asgard. The Vanir were associated with fertility of the land and sea, with wealth, and with a form of shamanic magic known as cedar. This magic was considered by some Aesir to be unmanly, yet it was so powerful that Odin himself sought out Freya to learn its secrets. The final upper world was Álfheimr, a domain of light and beauty, ruled by Freya's brother, Freyr. It was the home of the light elves, beings described as fairer to look upon than the sun. Positioned at the centre of the cosmos, a world of both order and vulnerability, was Midgard. This was the domain of humanity, created by the gods, but existing in a state of perpetual peril. The first humans were Ask and Embla. The story goes that a trio of gods, Odin and two others, sometimes identified as Honir and Lodur, found two lifeless pieces of driftwood on a seashore, an ash log and an elm log. The gods imbued them with life. Odin gave them spirit and breath, Honir gave them consciousness and motion, and Lodur gave them blood, senses, and fair appearance. From these two wooden figures descended the whole of the human race. The concept of Midgard is defined by its name. It is the Innengard, the inner yard, a space of civilization and human law. This space was protected by a defensive wall, a barrier made by the gods from the eyebrows of the primordial giant Ymir. Outside this wall was the Utangard, the outer yard, the wilderness, the domain of giants and monsters, the space of chaos. Midgard's existence, therefore, was defined by its separation from the untamed forces that surrounded it. That protective function was the primary duty of the god Thor. While Odin concerned himself with knowledge, fate, and the affairs of the gods, Thor was the tireless protector of Midgard, his hammer a weapon against the constant incursions of the giants. This physical and conceptual barrier was encircled by a last boundary, the great ocean that surrounded Midgard. In its depths lived the colossal serpent Jörmungandr, an offspring of Loki. Cast into the sea by Odin, the serpent grew so large that it could encircle the entire world and bite its own tail. Jörmungandr was not just a monster in the sea, it was a fundamental part of the cosmic structure, a self-containing Ouroboros that marked the absolute limit of the human world. Its presence ensured that Midgard was, in effect, a prison, a finite space from which there was no escape, and its eventual thrashing in the rage of Ragnarök would bring about the floods that would drown the world. Beyond the ordered domains of gods and humans lay the outer and lower worlds, the domains of chaos, craftsmanship, and the dead. The largest and most significant of these was Jotunheim, the world of the giants. It was a world of untamed, primordial nature. It was a land of crushing ice, dark forests, and impassable mountain ranges, a reflection of the wild and unpredictable character of its inhabitants, the Jötnar. The giants were the primary adversaries of the Aesir, yet the relationship was complex. The gods themselves were descended from giants, and they often sought out giantesses as wives or lovers. Jotunheim was the source of both existential threats and ancient wisdom that predated the gods. The nature of this chaotic world and the limits of the gods' power within it is best illustrated in the story of Thor's journey to the stronghold of the giant king, Utgarda Loki. Traveling with his companion, Loki, and two human servants, Thjalfi and Röskva, Thor arrived at a colossal castle. There, Utgarda Loki mocked their small size and challenged them to a series of contests. First, Loki, famed for his appetite, competed in an eating contest against a giant named Logi. Though Loki devoured the meat from a long trough at a shocking speed, Logi consumed the meat, the bones, and the trough itself. Next, the swift-footed human boy, Thjalfi, was pitted against a runner named Hugi in a race. Though Thjalfi ran faster than he ever had, Hugi outpaced him so completely it seemed the boy was standing still. Finally, it was Thor's turn. He was subjected to 3 challenges. First, he was challenged to a drinking contest, presented with a large horn and told that a true warrior could empty it in a single draught. Thor drank until his lungs ached, but the level of the liquid barely seemed to drop. Angered, he was then challenged to a test of strength, to lift the king's large grey cat from the floor. Thor put all his divine strength into the task, but could only manage to lift one of its paws from the ground. Humiliated, Thor was given a final, seemingly demeaning challenge, to wrestle with Utgarda Loki's old nurse, an ancient woman named Elli. Thor struggled mightily, but the old woman was implacably strong. The contest ended with the great god of thunder being forced down onto one knee. The next morning, as Thor and his companions were leaving, Utgarda-Loki escorted them out and revealed the truth. He confessed that he had bound their senses with powerful illusions. His castle, he revealed, was not even real. The contests were all deceptions. Loki's opponent was wildfire itself that consumed everything. Thjalfi's opponent, Hugi, was thought, fastest concept in the universe. And Thor's challenges were against the fundamental forces of the cosmos. The drinking horn was connected to the ocean, and Thor's mighty drafts had lowered the sea level, creating the tides. The grey cat was in fact the world serpent, Jörmungandr, and Thor had succeeded in lifting the monstrous creature so high that its back had nearly touched the sky. And the old woman, Elli, was old age itself, a force that no being, god or mortal, can ever defeat. Upon hearing this, Thor raised his hammer to strike the giant, but both Utgarda-Loki and his castle vanished, leaving them on an empty plain. The story is a critical lesson. The power of the giants was not just physical, but also rooted in illusion, deception, and a mastery of the unbeatable forces of nature and time. Beneath the surface of the worlds lay the dark and industrious domain of the dwarves. The sources are unclear if this was called Svartálfheim, the land of the black elves, or Niflheim, the dark fields, or if these were two names for the same place. This was a world of mountains, mines, and subterranean forges. The dwarves were the undisputed master craftspeople of the cosmos. Their skills were legendary, and many of the gods' most important possessions were forged in their workshops. A central story of their craft begins, as many do, with Loki's mischief. For a cruel joke, he cut off all of the golden hair of Sif, Thor's wife. Enraged, Thor threatened to break every bone in Loki's body unless he found a way to replace it. Loki travelled to the dwarves and commissioned a new head of hair for Sif, spun from the finest gold, which would grow on her head like natural hair. At the same time, the dwarves also crafted two other treasures: the ship Skidbladnir, which could be folded up and placed in one's pocket, and the spear Gungnir, which never missed its mark. Boasting of his success, Loki wagered his own head against a rival pair of dwarven smiths, Brokkr and his brother Eitri, that they could not forge 3 items to match the first. Despite Loki's attempts to sabotage their work by turning into a fly and biting them, the brothers succeeded. They produced the golden-bristled boar Gullinbursti, which could run through the air and water, the golden ring Draupnir, from which 8 identical rings would drip every 9th night, and their masterpiece, the hammer Mjolnir. Though its handle was slightly short due to Loki's interference, it was a weapon of incredible power that would always return to its owner's hand. The gods judged the hammer to be the greatest of all the treasures, for it would be their primary defense against the giants. Loki lost the wager, but saved his head on a technicality, arguing that the dwarves had a right to his head, but not to his neck. The dwarves settled for sewing his mouth shut. Finally, in the lowest and darkest part of the cosmos, lay Helheim, the world of the dead. This was not a place of punishment for the wicked, but the unavoidable destination for all those who did not die in battle, those who died of sickness, old age, or accident. The journey to this world was long and grim. The story of Hermodr's ride to Hel in the wake of the god Baldr's death provides our most detailed account. After Baldr was killed, the god Hermodr the Bold agreed to ride to the underworld to plead for his return. For 9 nights, he rode Odin's horse, Sleipnir, through valleys so dark he could see nothing. He eventually came to the river Gjöll, the Resounding, which was spanned by a bridge paved with glittering gold, the Gjallabru. The bridge was guarded by the giantess Modgudr, who allowed him to pass. At last he came to the massive gates of Hel. Inside the hall, he found Baldr seated in a place of honor. Hermodr pleaded with the goddess of the dead, Hel, for Baldr's release. Hel, the daughter of Loki, whose body was half a living woman and half corpse, agreed, but on one condition. Every single thing in all the 9 worlds, living or dead, must weep for Balder. If a single one refused, Balder must remain with her. The gods dispatched messengers to all corners of the cosmos, and everything wept: humans, animals, trees, stones. But on their return, they found one giantess in a cave who refused. "Let Hel hold what she has," she said. This single dissenter, widely believed to be Loki in disguise, sealed Balder's fate, closing the gates of Hel upon him until after Ragnarök. The detailed cosmic geography we have been discussing, with its specific worlds and interconnected pathways, presents a clear and organized picture. However, this clarity is largely the product of modern reconstruction. The process of transmitting these beliefs, from a vibrant, centuries-long oral tradition to a handful of written manuscripts, was a complex one, and the textual evidence that survived is fragmented, poetic, and at times contradictory. To present this cosmology as a fixed, universally agreed-upon map would be a disservice to the nature of the material. The idea of 9 worlds is a scholarly puzzle. Our knowledge of this system rests on 2 primary Icelandic sources from the 13th century. The first is the poetic Edda, an anonymous collection of poems containing our oldest and most direct mythological accounts. In the first and most important of these poems, the Völuspá, or Prophecy of the Seeress, we find the textual basis for the number 9. The Seeress, a vessel of ancient knowledge, states, "I remember 9 worlds, 9 giantesses." The number is explicit, and its repetition reinforces its importance. But the poem does not follow this statement with a neat, itemized list of what those 9 worlds are. It gives us a number, signifying a complete cosmos, but not a definitive index. Our second and far more systematic source is the prose Edda. This work was written by a single, known author, Snorri Sturluson, a highly influential Icelandic chieftain, poet, and historian. Snorri's primary motivation for writing the Edda was likely practical. By the 13th century, Iceland had been Christian for over 200 years, and the complex poetic language of the skalds, which relied heavily on mythological allusions known as kennings, was becoming incomprehensible. Snorri wrote a handbook for aspiring poets to preserve this cultural heritage. To do this, he had to first explain the stories the kennings were based on. His work is an invaluable, encyclopedic collection of myth. However, Snorri was a medieval Christian scholar, applying a structured, almost scholastic mindset to a fluid, pre-Christian oral tradition. This context presents several challenges for anyone seeking a pure, uncoloured view of the original beliefs. Snorri's work often appears to be an act of systematization. He takes disparate poetic accounts and attempts to organize them into a single, cohesive, and internally consistent narrative. Where an oral tradition could tolerate multiple contradictory versions of a story, Snorri's prose seeks to create a single, authoritative account. Furthermore, Snorri's own Christian worldview may have influenced his presentation. In the prologue to his Edda, he engages in euhemerism, the theory that gods were originally great human kings or heroes who became figures of worship after their deaths. He proposes that the Aesir were not gods at all, but a tribe of Trojan warriors who migrated north and were accepted as divine by the locals due to their superior knowledge and technology. This framing, which strips the gods of their divinity from the outset, may have been a way for him to justify writing about pagan figures in a Christian society. It also colours his presentation of the gods as deeply flawed, mortal beings, subject to a final doom, Ragnarök, that has noticeable parallels with Christian apocalyptic narratives. These issues of transmission and interpretation lead to specific textual ambiguities. For instance, Snorri makes a clear distinction between the light elves of Álfheim and the black elves, or dwarves, of Svartálfheim. The earlier poetry, however, is not so clear. The Völuspá mentions Niflheim, the dark fields, as a home for a race of dwarves, but the term Svartálfheim is Snorri's own. It is plausible that Snorri created the category of black elves to form a neat symmetry with the light elves, organizing the mythological beings into a more structured taxonomy than originally existed. Another example is Snorri's mention of Gimle, a golden-roofed hall in the heavens, described as the fairest of all, which will survive Ragnarök and become the home of righteous and good people. This concept of a post-apocalyptic haven for the virtuous has very little grounding in the earlier poetry and is widely considered by scholars to be a likely imposition of a Christian-like heaven onto the Norse framework. Because of these inconsistencies, any definitive list of the 9 worlds is an editorial or scholarly choice, not a fact presented by the sources. The conventional list, Asgard, Vanaheim, Álfheimr, Midgard, Jotunheim, Svartálfheim, Niflheim, Muspelheim, and Helheim, is a best fit model. The textual evidence does not allow us to be certain. This uncertainty, however, is not a failure of the mythology. It is evidence of its authentic nature as a living, evolving tradition that was passed down for centuries, changing and adapting with each telling, before being frozen in the few texts that have survived to us. What emerges from this complex and at times contradictory collection of sources is a vision of the universe that is fundamentally different from one of harmony or divine perfection. The Norse cosmos was not a static, completed creation, but a dynamic and deeply unstable system, one that was defined by the constant, generative friction between opposing forces. Its central pillar was not an invulnerable axis of an unchanging heaven, but a living, suffering tree that had to be actively maintained against its own inherent tendency toward decay. Its worlds were not peaceful domains, but fortified enclosures, precarious footholds of order established against a permanent and surrounding pressure of chaos. The entire system was animated by this conflict. The gods of Asgard were not omnipotent, serene beings. They were a warrior aristocracy, defined by their struggle against the giants, and their history was one of broken oaths, necessary violence, and questionable compromises. The creation of the cosmos itself was not an act of pristine making, but an act of brutal butchery and cosmic recycling, with the body of a slain ancestor forming the substance of the world. This is a cosmology that places struggle not as a flaw in the system, but as the engine that drives it. Ultimately, the architecture of the 9 worlds and the great tree that connects them is a direct reflection of a worldview shaped by a harsh and unforgiving environment. It is a system that venerates endurance over perfection, and courage in the face of certain doom over any hope of ultimate victory. The gods themselves are subject to a fate woven by the Norns, a destiny they cannot alter, only face. Their final battle, Ragnarök, is not an avoidable tragedy. It is the logical and necessary culmination of the universe's flawed design, the final playing out of all the tensions inherent in its creation. This vision of the cosmos tells us that meaning is found not in achieving a state of peace, but in the quality of one's conduct during the struggle. It is a universe where even the gods are mortal, and where the highest virtue is to face a known and inescapable end with unwavering resolve. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.